This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, a channel that's listened to by men and traditional women all over the planet. Today we are back at you with another great video story, and you can see the title right on your screen, Cheating Girlfriend Demoted to an Occasional Hookup Partner. Oh no. Let's get into this story and find out what it's all about. And this is the original post, and she starts out and she says, "I'm writing this to see if my current relationship is worth holding on to. I want to start by saying that I accept full responsibility for what has happened in my life as it pertains to my boyfriend. I'm not trying to pass blame, only looking for advice from people other than my friends and family. I've created this new account and will be using fake names to keep things confidential. I'm 23, Zoe is her name, and my boyfriend is 23 as well, Zeke. Until recently we were exclusive, and I still am with him, but for the past couple months, he's been dating other people. We met at college prior to the start of my junior year, his senior year. We clicked right away and started dating immediately. Zeke lived in the dorms while I lived off campus with two roommates who I'll be referring to as Dina and Crystal. I met my roommates after Dina posted an ad in our school newspaper looking for two female roommates to share a 3-bedroom apartment. I answered the ad, we met up, hit it off, and moved in together at the start of my junior year. We got along pretty well, even though we are so very different. Dina and Crystal are free spirits in every way, and she has that underlined, while I was far more reserved, very reserved actually. At first their behavior concerned me, but over time I found them both to have good hearts and to be fun to be around. I must admit though, I never fully accepted their lifestyles, and as such never fully trusted them. This wasn't a big deal during my junior year, as Zeke was still in school and he and I spent nearly every day together after school. We had a daily routine of studying, eating together, and being intimate. It was wonderful, and that year is probably going to go down as the best year in my life. After Zeke graduated, he landed a good job and moved to a city located about 90 minutes from our college. During this time, I traveled to his place every Friday evening and stayed with him until Monday morning, then drove back to school. During the week, I spent most of my time studying, as I was taking extra classes in order to graduate on time. My roommates were studying too, so we didn't hang out much except for Thursday evenings, which is kind of a big party night at our school. Well, I think it's a big party night at most colleges. We'd normally go out and eat somewhere, and then go to a bar after and hang out and talk to people. I normally would stay for an hour or so and then head back to the apartment as I had an 8 a.m. class on Friday mornings. Dina and Crystal didn't have classes on Friday and would often stay out well after midnight or stay out all night. Neither of them had a steady boyfriend, so it was not uncommon for them to bring guys back to the apartment on Thursday and over the weekend. I didn't care as long as they were quiet and stayed in their bedrooms. This was a rule we all agreed to and they didn't violate it, though I could hear faint noises from their rooms if I didn't wear earplugs, which I often had to do. Both Dina and Crystal had multiple guys, who I guess you would classify as friends with benefits. Now, when I say multiple, I'm not talking dozens. Dina had 3 semi-regular guys she'd bring over and Crystal had 2. And what I say to that is, I mean, these women being with multiple guys at the same time. I'm not saying, hey, they're all hooking up together, but they're seeing this. Dina's seeing 3 different guys and this Crystal is seeing 2. That is just unsanitary and gross. She goes on and says, they also had one guy who I'll call Glenn that they shared between them. Not at the same time, but they both shared this guy individually. They knew it and were cool with it. Oh boy. You know what I got to say about these 2 women? I mean, they are STD factories. These kind of women, even though they may seem tempting because, they're going to give you that good stuff. I recommend just totally staying away from women like that because you don't want to go near them unless you have a full body hazmat suit on. I mean, it's just too dangerous. Glenn was a junior and plays on the hockey team. He's not at all smart. In fact, he's a terrible student, but the athletic department works it out. So he somehow passes his classes. So this guy probably got a scholarship, I'm guessing, for hockey or some other sport, and he's a terrible student. So they're just passing him along so that he gets to play hockey there. That's what I'm reading from this. She goes on and says, Glenn is not good looking in any sense, but he's tall and has an unnaturally muscular body. He's also known for having an attribute that is much more significant than other members of his gender. She says, I'm keeping things PG here. Dina and Crystal have been with Glenn multiple times. Now listen to this. She says, he basically has an open invitation to drop by whenever he wants, and if one of them is available, they will sleep with him. Both Dina and Crystal told me several times that he has expressed an interest in being with me too, though he never approached me. I, of course, rejected this and told them I was really offended by his suggestion. This brings me to what happened in May. It was a Friday. The school year had ended, and it was our last night together as roommates. We made it through college. To celebrate, Dina, Crystal, and I made plans to have dinner and a little fun that night. I told Zeke all about it, and he was fine with everything as he trusted me completely. I texted him all night letting him know what I was doing. Zeke and I had plans for a special celebration of our own Saturday night when I got to his place. Now back to Friday. We took an Uber to the restaurant, and then from the restaurant we went to a campus bar where a lot of our friends were present. We stayed there until the bar closed, then Ubered back to the apartment. Though I normally don't drink, that night I did, and way too much. I started with a banana daiquiri, but don't remember all the other things I drank except for the flute of champagne we all had to toast our graduation. I'd never been drunk before and didn't realize how much alcohol can affect your judgment. So you can already see she's pointing out what I'm about to do. It's probably because I was drunk. When we got back to the apartment, Dina, Crystal, and I sat in the living room and talked until their guys got there. When they did, they each went into their bedrooms. I was left all alone in the living room. I was so out of it that I flipped on the TV and decided just to curl up on the couch with a blanket and sleep there. I had just dozed off when there was a knock at the door. I went to answer and saw it was Glenn. Here comes Glenn with his big unit. I let him in and told him that Dina and Crystal were already in bed. He started towards Dina's room, but I told him that they both were already with someone. He said, bummer, and came into the living room and sat right down on the couch where I had been laying. He started talking to me about my plans after school and a bunch of other stuff. After about 30 minutes of talking, he kissed me. So, she must have been sitting right beside him on the couch. Now, if he went and sat on that couch, why didn't she go sit somewhere else on a chair or somewhere? I resisted and explained my situation with Zeke. Glenn apologized, but said he wanted me desperately. I told him no. I was exclusive with my boyfriend. Do you think she really told him that? I wish I could say that's where things ended, but they didn't. We talked more and then he started kissing me again, and this time I kissed him back. We didn't have us, but I found out later that I apparently did do something to him that night. I fell asleep on the couch and Glenn left sometime during the night. In the morning, I woke up with a headache and the previous night was all a blur. Dina and Crystal were still in bed and their guys were gone. I made coffee and the smell woke them up. We started talking and laughing about last night. Then Crystal asked me how I like being with Glenn. I didn't remember him being there, so I questioned what she meant. Now, she says right here, I don't remember him being there, but then she just told us that she remembers kissing him and him kissing her first. So, get your story straight. Crystal said Stacy, the guy she spent the night with, said she saw me giving Glenn blank and you know what that means she was giving him. I told her that wasn't true and said I just fell asleep on the couch. Crystal said, oh no you didn't. She said Stacy came back in her bedroom after using the bathroom and told her what I was doing. She said they both crept back out and watched me. At this point, I lost it and screamed at Crystal asking her why didn't she stop me. She said it was none of their business and that I was clearly enjoying myself. I told her I wasn't enjoying myself as I didn't even remember it. Crystal told me I was fully aware and was loving it. I started crying and begged them not to tell Zeke about this if they ever saw him again. They told me not to worry and they had my back. After this, I went in to take a shower and cried my eyes out regretting what I'd apparently done. When I got out, I called and talked to Zeke. He stayed on the phone with me while I packed up my stuff. Then Dina, Crystal, and I left the apartment at the same time and decided to grab lunch before leaving town. About an hour later, as the three of us were sitting at an outside table, I got a call from Zeke. He asked me if I was somewhere where I could access my phone. I said yes. He said he had something he wanted to send me. I asked him what it was, and he said you'll see. He said to take a look at it and call him back to discuss it. I said okay and waited and waited. Finally, after we had all finished eating, I got a ping on my phone. I glanced at the message and couldn't believe what I saw. It was a picture of Glenn sitting on the couch without clothes with me kneeling in front of him. I was destroyed and just started crying. I didn't say anything to Dina and Crystal and just got up and ran into the ladies' room. They ran after me and found me crying in one of the stalls. I started screaming at Crystal, asking her how she could do something like this to me. She asked what. I told her about this picture. She swore she hadn't taken the picture and hadn't told anyone about me and Glenn. We then figured that it must have been Stacy, but wondered how he found Zeke and why he would do this. Crystal said she told Stacy I was in a relationship, but nothing more. We figured he must have found Zeke on Facebook or Instagram. Crystal said she didn't see him take the picture and said he must have taken it before coming back into the room. She said Stacy hates Glenn, so that might be why he did it. She said he probably did this to try to get back at Glenn somehow. I asked why would Stacy do this to me? I'm the only injured party as a result of this whole thing. So she's saying she's the only injured party, not her boyfriend who she just cheated on the previous night, but just she is the only injured party. They stayed in the restroom with me while I cleaned up and settled down. We then went back out and talked for another hour as they helped me contemplate what I was going to tell Zeke when I called him back. So she's saying we all were discussing how I could spin this story and get out of this mess I'm in. Eventually, I got back to my car and called Zeke. He answered and said hey. Initially, he didn't seem upset at all. I told him I was so sorry about the picture and for what I had done. I explained that I was drunk and couldn't handle it. I then told him that I honestly didn't remember doing anything with that guy in the pic. Zeke told me I looked wide awake and very enthusiastic in the picture. I started crying and kept telling him I didn't remember. He said okay and didn't say anything else, but I could tell he was getting emotional as his voice cracked. I told him I was going to start driving his way, and he told me not to. I asked why, and he said you know why. He then said he was breaking up with me. I pulled over and begged him not to do this. I asked him to let me come to his place and explain everything. He said what else is there to say? I told him I had a lot to say. With that, he said thanks for all the good times we had. Good luck and hung up. I called him back and he answered. I asked him to just talk to me and he again said there was nothing more to say and for me not to drive to his place because he was leaving for the rest of the weekend. I asked where he was going and he wouldn't tell me. I hung up and drove to his place anyway. When I got to his apartment, he wasn't there and didn't respond to my calls and messages. I waited in my car outside his apartment for over 2 hours before finally giving up and driving to my parents' house an hour away. On my way, I called my mom and told her what I'd done. So you told your mother everything? Oh boy. She screamed and yelled at me as I drove, and I cried the entire way home. She called me a bunch of names and said she was ashamed of me. Mom did, however, agree not to tell anyone about this, including my dad, as he would never forgive me or see me the same way again. We decided to tell him Zeke, and I just grew apart and broke up. That Saturday will go down as the worst day in my life. After I got to my parents' house, I talked to my mom for a while and then went up to my room and called Zeke. I explained to him that even though I was in that position in the picture, I didn't think I actually did anything. Oh, come on. He interrupted me and asked me to stop lying, saying that he also had a 50-second video of me enthusiastically performing the act on Glenn. So she's totally busted here. I was so upset I just hung up on Zeke and let out a scream of desperation. My mom heard me and came running up the stairs as she thought I had done something to myself. I explained to her that I had just talked to Zeke and there was a video of me. My mom said we need to report this to the police as this is a crime. I told her I didn't want to as I didn't want the attention or embarrassment. I then decided to call Crystal and get Stacy's number. I called him multiple times and left him messages to call me back, but he didn't. Finally, I had enough and sent him a text and said I was going to report what he did to the police if he didn't call me back in the next hour. 5 minutes later, he called me back and started apologizing. I asked him why he did this to me and told him he ruined my life. He said he did it because he hated Glenn and also he felt that my boyfriend should know. I told him what he did was terrible and he could have just told my boyfriend without taking the picture and video. I asked him who he shared the media with, and he swore to God that the only person he sent the images to was Zeke. He went on to say that Crystal knew nothing about the picture or video, and that he found Zeke on Instagram after looking at my profile. I asked him to send me the video, but he refused, saying he was going to delete both the video and picture off his phone and off his cloud right then with me on the phone. I told him to send me a screenshot confirming this, which he did. He also sent me a text message apologizing and again saying he deleted the media. I responded with a text saying if I found out that he still had the images that I would file a police report and press charges against him. He called me back and swore that he had done so and again apologized. While I was not happy about the situation, I felt so much better and somewhat relieved after talking to him. So there I was expecting to be engaged sometime that summer, and instead I was all alone due to a stupid lapse in judgment. During June and July, I tried everything to get Zeke back or at least talk to me, but he never responded. I was in a complete depression. Thankfully, during this time, I was able to land a job at a company I wanted to work at. This kept me going and helped me get through. I had reached a point when I had all but given up on trying to contact Zeke, but then I decided to call him on his birthday. I wanted to be the first person to wish him a happy birthday, so I called him at 12:01 a.m., and to my surprise, he answered. I wished him a happy birthday, and we talked for nearly 2 hours. I begged him for another chance, or even for just one final time together for closure. He explained to me that there's no chance for us as a couple, but to my surprise said he would be interested in getting together one final time. So old Zeke wanted to get a little bit here. He said he missed my body but made it clear we would only have to do it for pleasure and nothing more. I was all right with this as I thought it was a good first step. Zeke then asked if I'd been tested and asked me to send him the results, which I did. He then told me to come to his apartment Sunday evening at 6 p.m. He said I should not pack a bag as I couldn't stay over, but we could spend a few hours together. I went and we had a wonderful time. It was both beautiful and passionate, just like we used to be, actually even better. Before leaving, I told him to call me whenever he wanted, and I would drop everything and be there ASAP. So that's what I've done. Over the past 3 months, we've gotten together 7 times, mostly on Sunday evening, but one time on a Tuesday, when he had the day off. I thoroughly enjoy each time we've been together. I think it's because I love him so much, combined with the fact that no one knows we're seeing each other except he and I, which makes it feel like we're sneaking around. He's made it clear that he's seeing other women, and I know he is, as I've seen pictures of him out with women on his Facebook and Instagram. He's explained to me that he'll never again take me on a date and to not expect anything more than we have today. So he's telling her right there, hey, I'm not even going to take you out on a date. All you're going to do is when I want it, you can come over and we can hook up, and then you're going to leave and that's it. Don't expect anything more. Hearing this hurt me, but I kept going back. Now listen to this. Before each of our get-togethers, he makes me send him a text asking him if I can come over to have sex with him. Like a fool, I do it every time. One day I forgot to, and he wouldn't let me in his apartment until I sent him the stupid text. He said he does this to protect himself in case I try to falsely accuse him of something, which is ridiculous. This brings me to my dilemma. On one hand, I know I'm just being used, but on the other hand, I still have that connection to him, and thus still have a chance. Ladies, what would you do if you were me? Have any of you been in this type of relationship, and how has it worked out? For the guys out there, I'd like to hear from you as to whether you think Zeke is just playing me, or if by him letting me back in his life, even for just physical contact, is a sign he wants me back. Thanks for reading my story, Zoe. So that's her original post, and now we're going to take a look at a few comments she got back from the community. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you're liking what you hear, hit that like button right now. That will ensure this video gets seen by people all over the planet. Now, let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one's from a guy. He says, "Let me say you are a vile and disgusting person for what you did, and you deserve everything you're getting now. With that said, for your sake and for his, I think you should stop seeing him and go your separate ways. A real man will never forgive a cheating woman. He may keep you around a while for pleasure, but eventually he's going to dump you. Is that what you want?" The next response is from a woman. She says, "He's using you, can't you see that? Yes, you made a terrible mistake, but it's time he gets over it now and either accepts you or moves on. What he's doing now is a male version of monkey branching. He's just keeping you around to fill holes in his dating schedule, but one day he's going to find a woman he wants to settle down with and give you the boot. Get rid of him," she says. The next response is also from a woman. She says, "This guy sounds like a psycho and is definitely toxic. Okay, here we go. He actually makes you send an email asking him for S before he lets you in. That's insane. Stop doing that. Even if he stays with you, he's going to keep throwing your mistake up in your face. Do you want to live the rest of your life like that? Take this as a lesson learned and go out and find a guy who will love you for who you are." And we've got another response here from a woman. She says, "Stop giving yourself to him and getting nothing in return. See, it's all about transactions for a lot of these women. You need to be getting something back from him." She says, "He's treating you like a common S worker without getting paid for it. You're worth so much more. Unless this guy knocks your socks off in bed, what are you getting out of the current arrangement? You could be putting all that effort into finding a great guy who will treat you like the queen you are. Good luck and keep us posted." And then finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, "I think you did more with Glenn than what you've disclosed here, and I think you remember every detail because it was always your plan." I have to agree with this guy. When I read this story for the first time, I said, "Is that all she did was give him up?" I think she did a hell of a lot more. He didn't just drop by that night. I think you invited him over. That's okay, because as women you control your body. Well, guess what? We men control who we get into relationships with, and if we don't see you as relationship material, that's our choice, and that's true. So remember that, guys. They control their bodies, but we control the status of the relationship. Now we're going to go through the updates that she has, and the first one was from just 3 weeks after her original post. She says, "I'm back to give a quick update. Against the advice that most of you provided me, I've decided to continue to see Zeke whenever he'll let me. I know I'm probably crazy for doing so, but I'm just not ready to give up on us yet." As a bit of good news, last weekend, instead of just wanting to see me on Sunday evening, he asked me to come over Saturday night too and stay over Saturday and Sunday night. I couldn't believe it and was so excited. It was like a honeymoon of sorts since it rained all weekend and we ended up staying in bed most of the time, and So that's what I've got to share for now. Thanks again for the kind words and encouragement you've provided me. While I did get a lot of crude comments and hate from some low-life, or should I say no-life guys, most of the responses I received were very thoughtful. Even those who said things I really didn't want to hear. I don't plan to update again, as I'm just going to concentrate on building my relationship with Zeke. Thanks again, and be well, Zoe. Well, she doesn't end there like she said. She wasn't going to update anymore because she comes back with a final update, and she does this 4 months after that last post. She says, "I wanted to come back with a quick update to let everyone know how things ended up for Zeke and I. I'm no longer seeing him. If you recall, in my last post, I thought we were making progress, but then after I spent an entire weekend with him, he basically just ghosted me for the next month. I called and asked if I could come over, and he kept making excuses, saying that he had family things to do or that he had a work project and didn't have any free time. As it turns out, he was spending time with another woman. I found this out through doing some social media sleuthing. I found the girl on Instagram and saw all her posts of the two of them together. I was brokenhearted at first, but was willing to let this go, thinking now that he evened the score, we could be a couple again. Nope. The last straw was on my birthday. I expected him to at least call or text me to wish me a happy birthday, but there was nothing. I was so broken up about this that the following day I sent him a text saying I could no longer see him as it was tearing me apart. He just texted back, "Okay." That was 3 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from him since. I think we're really done this time. I was devastated for a week and actually had to take time off work to mourn, but now I've decided to move on with my life. This weekend, for the first time in nearly 3 years, I'm going out on a first date with a guy my cousin set me up with. He's very cute and sounds super nice. We're going out on Saturday evening to grab a drink and we'll continue with dinner if we hit it off. Wish me luck. I want to thank all of you for your messages, which helped me get through this difficult period. You don't know how much you helped me. Take care and be well, Zoe. So that's her story. Now I wanted to cover what I think are the morals of the story. The first one: if you live with pigs, you're bound to get dirty, and she starts living with these two wild women. Okay, let's just face it, these women were kind of off the charts wild. When you're around people like that and you're living in close proximity to them, eventually their behaviors are going to rub off on you, and look what happened to her. Number two, a relationship without boundaries is not a relationship at all. She stepped over the line, of course, with this Glenn, and this guy, I have to say, handled the situation like he should have. He cut her off right then. Where he made a mistake is he started seeing her again. Now, a lot of guys out there are going to say, hey, so what, she was just giving up the good stuff and she was basically just like a friends with benefits type situation. What's wrong with that? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with that, because she could have roped him back in. Number three, guys should always, or I should say must always, wear protection and use dental dams. The pleasure is not worth the risk. Look at those two roommates of hers seeing multiple guys on a semi-regular basis, not to mention all the randos they probably took in as well, and then with her, she just hooked up with this guy out of the blue. If that Stacy didn't take the picture and the video and send it to her boyfriend, guess what? Her boyfriend would have never found out about this, and he could have hooked up with her right after. You know, when she got to his place the following night, I guarantee she would have hooked up with him. That's why I say, guys, always wear protection. And finally, number four, don't try to repair a broken relationship. Instead, learn from your mistakes and do better the next time. That's all this woman in this story can do. Learn from her mistakes, even though I don't think what she did was a mistake. I think she planned it out. Learn from her bad behavior, maybe I'll say, and move forward and do better the next time. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Do you think that the guy in this story, the boyfriend Zeke, handled this situation right, or would you have done something different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will— Hey there, I'm Mark. Life's got this funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. You think you've got it all figured out, and then bam. That's where my story starts, with a discovery in the least likely of places: my wife's car. It was a Tuesday. I needed to grab some groceries, and Claire, that's my wife, her car was blocking mine. So, I figured, why not just use hers? It's funny how the smallest decisions can lead to the biggest changes. I'm driving along, humming to some old tune on the radio, when I realized I forgot the shopping list. Trust me to forget my head if it wasn't screwed on, right? I pulled over, rummaging through the glove compartment for a pen and paper. And that's when I found it, an unopened condom packet, tucked away beneath a pile of old receipts and gum wrappers. Now, Claire and we've been married for a good 7 years. We've had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we stopped using those things after we decided to try for a kid. That was years ago, so you can imagine the cold knot that started forming in my stomach. For a moment, I just sat there, turning the packet over in my hands. It was one of those fancy brands, not the kind you'd expect to find forgotten in a car. The expiration date was next year. Fresh, new. I remember the ride home. It felt longer than usual, every traffic light mocking me with its red glare, every second stretching out like an accusation. My mind was racing with a million thoughts, but one kept pushing its way to the forefront. Was Claire cheating on me? When I got home, I did the whole normal routine. Asked her how her day was, listened to her talk about work and the new fitness class she joined. She seemed so normal. So, Claire, it was surreal. I wanted to blurt out my discovery, confront her right there, but something held me back. Fear, maybe, or maybe I just didn't want to face the possibility that my life wasn't what I thought it was. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Claire was asleep next to me, her breathing steady and peaceful. I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. My mind kept replaying our past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. Late nights at work, those new friends she'd made at the gym, her phone buzzing at odd hours. Sleep didn't come easy that night. And when it did, it was filled with dreams of shadows and whispers, a maze of doubts and half-seen faces. I woke up feeling like I'd run a marathon, every part of me heavy with a sense of impending doom. The next few days were a blur of observation and paranoia. I noticed how she'd started taking her phone everywhere with her, even to the bathroom. How she'd quickly change the screen if I walked by. I tried to shake the feeling off, told myself I was being ridiculous. But you know what they say about gut feelings. They're rarely wrong, and mine was screaming at me that something was off. I just didn't know what to do with that information. Confronting her seemed like stepping off a cliff. Ignorance, as they say, is bliss. But is it really, when every look, every touch, feels tainted with doubt? That's where my journey began, in a haze of confusion and mistrust. Little did I know, it was only going to get more complicated from there. So there I was, playing the world's worst detective in the most messed up episode of my life. I started watching Claire like a hawk, looking for anything. Any little thing that might scream, "Hey Mark, your wife's stepping out on you." Every day became this bizarre game of observation. I noticed the smallest changes, a new perfume scent clinging to her when she came home, her coming back from work later than usual, phone calls where she'd quickly leave the room. None of it was a smoking gun, but boy, did it add fuel to the fire raging in my mind. I tried to act normal, but inside, I was a mess. My thoughts were constantly circling back to that damn condom packet. Sometimes, I'd catch myself just staring at Claire, trying to read her, figure out what was going on behind those eyes I thought I knew so well. Then, one evening, something happened. It was garbage day, so I was hauling out the trash, and I found this crumpled receipt from a restaurant tucked into the kitchen bin. It was for 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine. Claire had told me she was working late that night. I remember feeling this jolt of shock, mixed with an odd sense of vindication. It was like, aha, gotcha. I confronted her about it. Tried to keep my voice steady, but it probably came out all accusing like, "Hey, found this receipt. You didn't mention going out for dinner the other night." Her reaction? Annoyance. Pure and simple, she rolled her eyes, told me it was a lunch meeting with a client, that they'd taken the receipt for expenses, but must have accidentally given her a copy. She made it sound so mundane, so plausible. I wanted to believe her. God. I wanted to just laugh it off, call myself a paranoid idiot, and move on. But something in the pit of my stomach just wouldn't let me. It's like when you start suspecting something, everything becomes a clue, a piece of the puzzle. After that, things between us got tense. I couldn't shake off the feeling that she was hiding something. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much she'd changed recently. There were all these little things. Like, she'd started working out more, which was great, but she'd never been much into fitness before. Her wardrobe had changed too, nothing drastic, but she was definitely dressing sharper, more, I don't know, attractively. And her phone. That damn phone was always with her, always buzzing with new messages. I remember one night, lying in bed next to her, watching the soft glow of her phone screen lighting up her face. She thought I was asleep, but I was just lying there, wondering who was on the other end of those messages. And then there were the late nights. She'd always been a bit of a workaholic, but it was getting ridiculous. Always some project, some deadline that kept her at the office till all hours. I started to wonder, were they really all work-related? I felt like I was going crazy, second-guessing everything, doubting the woman I'd shared my life with for almost a decade. But I couldn't let it go. It was like this nagging voice in the back of my head, constantly whispering that something wasn't right. So, I did what any sane person would do. Note the sarcasm here. I started snooping more. I'd check her browser history when she was in the shower, try to glance at her phone screen over her shoulder. I hated myself for it, felt like some creepy stalker instead of her husband. But I just had to know. One day, while she was out running errands, I even went through her closet and drawers. I told myself I was looking for more receipts, any physical proof. But deep down, I think I was just trying to find a connection to the woman I felt I was losing. Everything I found was so painfully normal. Clothes, shoes, Old books, bits of jewelry. No secret love letters, no hidden burner phone. Just the everyday stuff of the woman I loved and, possibly, the woman who was betraying me. It's funny, in a twisted way. You think you know someone, think you built this life together, and then one day, you're sifting through their belongings, looking for evidence that they're lying to you. It's a special kind of hell, let me tell you. But despite all my snooping, all my paranoia, I didn't find anything concrete. Just a bunch of maybes and what ifs. I was stuck in this limbo, torn between wanting to confront her with my suspicions and fearing what that confrontation would bring. In the end, I didn't have to make that decision. Because that's when things took a turn for the bizarre. That's when I found something that changed everything. Okay, so here's where things start getting a little, let's say, film noir. I started tailing Claire. Yeah, I know how it sounds. Creepy, obsessive, choose your adjective. But the thing is, the suspicion was eating me alive. I had to know the truth, even if it meant crossing lines I never thought I'd even approach. One afternoon, I decided to follow her. She said she was meeting a friend for coffee. Something about the way she said it, that slight hesitation, set off alarm bells in my head. So, I got into my car and trailed her from a distance. She went to this quaint little cafe downtown, the kind with cozy boobs and a constant hum of conversation. I sat in my car across the street, feeling like a complete stalker. I watched her walk in, and a few minutes later, this guy joined her. Tall, well-dressed, with a confidence in his stride that made my stomach churn. They sat in a booth by the window, laughing and talking. From where I sat, I could see their expressions, the easy way they leaned into each other's space. It was intimate, too intimate. My hand was gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. I remember thinking, this is it, Mark. This is what you were afraid of. But a part of me still hoped I was wrong, that there was an innocent explanation for all of this. Maybe he was just an old friend, maybe. I drove home before they left the cafe, couldn't stomach watching any longer. Back home, I was a bundle of nerves. Claire came back later, humming some tune, acting like everything was normal. It took every ounce of self-control I had not to confront her right then and there. Instead, I waited for my chance to snoop on her phone. Yeah, I know, invasion of privacy and all that. But I was desperate, so, when she went to take a shower, I grabbed her phone from the bedside table. I felt like a criminal as I quickly scanned through her messages, her call history. But there was nothing, no incriminating texts, no mysterious calls. It was all so frustratingly normal. Friends, family, work stuff. I even checked her photos, but all I found were selfies, pictures of our dog, random shots of our last vacation. I sat there, her phone in my hand, feeling like the world's biggest idiot. Was I just being paranoid? Was my imagination running wild, conjuring up affairs and betrayals where there were none? I mean, what was I expecting to find? Some explicit texts, a secret second life? I put her phone back, my mind a whirlwind of doubt and confusion. Claire came back from her shower, all smiles and casual chatter. I just nodded along, my mind miles away. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I felt like I was next to a stranger. It's a strange feeling, lying beside someone you've shared your life with, wondering if you ever really knew them at all. Every laugh, every touch, was it all just a lie? Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Claire, looking for anything out of the ordinary. But everything seemed to go back to normal. Work, gym, the occasional outing with friends. If she was having an affair, she was damn good at covering her tracks. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was just seeing things that weren't there. What then? There were these little moments, these tiny slip-ups that kept the embers of my suspicion alive. Like the way she'd quickly end phone calls when I walked into the room, or how she'd become more protective of her phone, always making sure it was within her reach. I even tried casually asking about her day, her friends, trying to gauge her reactions. But Claire was a closed book. She'd answer my questions with a smile, never giving away anything more than surface details. I was stuck in this limbo of doubt and uncertainty. Part of me wanted to just let it go, to chalk it up to a rough patch in our marriage and move on. But another part, a louder part, kept pushing me to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. So, I continued my little game of cat and mouse, watching, waiting, hoping for something, anything, that would either confirm my fears or put them to rest. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to realize something. Living in a constant state of suspicion was no way to live at all. I needed answers, one way or another. And little did I know, those answers were closer than I thought. 2 days after the cafe incident, I hit a breaking point. You know that feeling when something's eating you up inside, and you just gotta let it out, consequences be damned? That was me, standing in our kitchen, watching Claire cook dinner, pretending like everything was just peachy. Finally, I blurted out, "Claire, we need to talk. Who's the guy you were with at the cafe?" Her reaction? A mix of surprise and this sort of frustrated annoyance. She turned off the stove, faced me with her arms crossed, and said, "He's just a friend, Mark. You're acting crazy." And that's how our big blow-up started. Our kitchen, which had seen many a peaceful meal, suddenly turned into a battlefield. She denied everything, said I was being paranoid, that there was nothing going on. She kept asking me to trust her, but trust is a fragile thing. Once it starts cracking, good luck trying to patch it up. I wanted to believe her. Every fiber of my being was screaming for me to just accept her explanation and move on. But there was this nagging voice in my head, a persistent little whisper that kept saying, "What if?" The argument escalated. I asked about the changes in her behavior, the late nights, the secrecy with her phone. She had an answer for everything. Work stress, needing some personal space, a desire to feel good about herself. It all sounded reasonable, but there was a part of me that just couldn't buy it completely. We went round and round, our voices getting louder, our words more cutting. It's funny, in a sad way, how quickly love can turn to anger when fear and doubt are thrown into the mix. We were no longer just husband and wife. We were opponents in an emotional tug-of-war, each trying to pull the other into our own version of reality. I accused her of lying, of cheating. She accused me of not trusting her, of being obsessed. The words stung. They hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. I saw tears in her eyes, and damn it, my heart ached. I hated that we were doing this, that I'd let my suspicions drag us down this dark path. But once you open Pandora's box, you can't just shove everything back in and close the lid. The doubts, the fears, the hurt, they were all out in the open now, swirling around us like some malevolent storm. Eventually, the storm passed, as they tend to do. We were left standing in the ruins of our once peaceful evening, emotionally exhausted, each lost in our own turmoil. Claire wiped her eyes, muttered something about needing some air, and left the house. I just stood there, in the silence of our kitchen, feeling like the biggest jerk on the planet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the argument in my head, analyzing every word, every expression. Part of me was scared that I'd pushed her too far, that this might be the beginning of the end for us. Another part was still clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong about everything. The next day, Claire was distant. We moved around each other like two strangers, polite but cautious. The air was thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. I wanted to reach out, to try and fix things, but I didn't know how. It felt like we were standing on either side of a chasm, with no bridge in sight. As the days passed, the tension between us grew. We were stuck in this weird limbo, neither of us knowing how to move forward. It was like we were both waiting for something to happen, something that would either mend the cracks in our relationship or break it apart completely. And then, something did happen. Something that changed the game entirely. That night, when everything changed, started off like any other in our new, tension-filled normal. Claire said she was going out to clear her head, get some space. I was left alone, sitting in a living room that suddenly felt too big, too empty. I was mindlessly flipping through channels when her phone, left on the coffee table, buzzed to life. Instinctively, I reached for it. Caller ID was just a number, no name. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered it. "Hello." "Claire's phone," I said, trying to sound casual. The voice on the other end was male, confident, a little too smooth for my liking. Hey, it's me. Can I talk to Claire? I felt my heart rate spike. It was him, the guy from the cafe. My mind raced. I needed to play this cool. Sorry, she's not here right now. Can I take a message? I tried to keep my voice steady, disguising it slightly. There was a pause, then a cautious, no, that's okay. I'll call back later, and he hung up, just like that, but that brief exchange was enough. It was him, the guy the first saw with Claire. I sat there, her phone in my hand, my mind reeling. This was it, the proof I'd been so desperately searching for, and yet, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Claire came home later, finding me in the same spot, her phone still in my hand. I saw the moment she realized I'd answered it. Her face went white, her eyes wide with something that looked a lot like fear. We need to talk, Claire, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. She just nodded, taking a seat across from me. The air was heavy, charged with a tension that felt almost tangible. I told her about the call, about the guy asking for her. I watched her closely, looking for any sign, any tell that would give her away. And then, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face, her body shaking with sobs. It's true, Mark, I've been having an affair. I'm so sorry. The words hit me like a tidal wave. Even though I'd suspected, hearing her say it out loud was a whole different kind of pain. It was real now, undeniable. I felt a range of emotions crashing over me. Anger, hurt, betrayal. But more than anything, I felt lost. This was Claire, my Claire, the woman I'd shared my life with, my dreams, my bed. And she'd been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. Why, Claire? Why him? Why this? The questions poured out of me, each one like a blow to the chest. She tried to explain, through her tears, about feeling neglected, about needing something more. She talked about how we'd drifted apart, how she'd felt lonely and unappreciated. It was like listening to a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. I listened, but it was hard to hear past the roar of betrayal in my ears. She said it was a mistake, that she regretted it, that she wanted to work things out. But the trust was shattered, broken into a million pieces. We talked, or rather, she talked and I listened, for what felt like hours. But the more she said, the more distant I felt. It was like standing on the shore, watching our marriage, our life together, drift away into a sea of lies and deceit. That night, I slept on the couch. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling a profound sense of emptiness. I was at a crossroads, torn between the life I thought I had and the reality that was crashing down around me. The next few days were a blur. We were like two ghosts, haunting the same house, barely speaking, barely acknowledging each other. I was trapped in a cycle of anger and sadness, not sure how to break free. I thought about leaving, just packing my bags and walking away. But it wasn't that simple. There was our history, our shared memories, the love that, despite everything, still lingered somewhere in the depths of my heart. But could I ever trust her again? Could we ever go back to how things were? The answer seemed to be a resounding no, echoing in the silence between us. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, life threw another curveball my way. The days that followed Claire's confession felt like walking through a surreal, feverish nightmare. Words like divorce and separation, once unthinkable, became part of our daily vocabulary. We were two people caught in a whirlwind of hurt, anger, and disappointment, trying to make sense of a life that had suddenly turned upside down. Negotiations about who'd get what were petty and painful. We'd sit across the table, discussing assets and memories like they were just items on a checklist. Our home, once filled with laughter and love, had become a battleground of bitterness and regret. Claire lost a lot in the fallout. Her marriage, for starters. Then there was her reputation. Once word got out about the affair, friends began to choose sides. It was ugly and spiteful, the kind of drama you'd expect from a bad TV show, not real life. And the guy, her lover from the cafe, turned out he was married, with kids. A whole other life Claire either didn't know about or chose to ignore. When his wife found out, That little fling crumbled like a house of cards. He wasn't about to leave his family, and Claire was left with nothing but broken promises and a shattered heart. As for me, I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I hardly recognized anymore. I moved out, found a small apartment that felt more like a temporary shelter than a home. The walls were bare, the rooms echoed with the kind of silence that only comes from loss. In the quiet of my new place, I'd often find myself sifting through memories, trying to figure out where things went wrong. Was there a moment, a sign I missed? Could I have done something different, been a better husband, a better friend? I knew deep down that these were pointless questions. What happened, happened. Claire made her choices, and now we were both living with the consequences. But knowing that didn't make the nights any less lonely or the mornings any less daunting. I had been right about my suspicions, but the victory was hollow. There was no satisfaction in having uncovered the truth, only a profound sense of loss. I had lost my wife, my partner, my best friend. In trying to hold on to the truth, I had let go of a part of myself. The divorce was finalized with a cold, bureaucratic efficiency. We signed papers in a sterile office, our once vibrant relationship reduced to a few signatures and legal terms. Claire and I barely spoke. What was there to say? Goodbye, sorry, none of it seemed enough. Life moved on, as it always does. I immersed myself in work, in hobbies, in anything that could fill the void. Friends tried to be supportive, setting me up on blind dates, inviting me to social gatherings. But I was a ghost among the living, going through the motions without really being present. Claire reached out a few times, emails mostly, expressing remorse, a desire to talk. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too raw. Maybe one day we could find a way to be in each other's lives, but that day was not today. As months turned into a year, I started to feel like I was waking up from a long, troubled sleep. The pain was still there, a dull ache in the background, but it was no longer the all-consuming force it once was. I began to realize that life, for all its unpredictability and heartache, still had a lot to offer. I discovered new passions, rekindled old friendships, and started to appreciate the simple, everyday moments that I had taken for granted. Looking back, I can't say I regret the path my life has taken. Sure, there are things I wish had gone differently, words I wish I could take back, moments I wish I could relive. But every experience, good or bad, shapes us into who we are. I don't know what the future holds, and that's okay. I've learned that it's not the certainty of the path that matters, but the journey itself. And my journey, though marked by scars, is still very Reddit relationship advice. Update. My fiancé was caught cheating the day before our wedding. Hey, everyone. I am back with an update about my fiancé cheating on me the day before our wedding. As you know, she was cheating on me with an old boyfriend who has since passed away from a drug overdose. I accompanied her to the funeral. I know I shouldn't have, but I thought it was just the right thing to do. By no means. I plan on getting back with her, but I just figured I was helping someone in need. After I attended the funeral with her, we sort of went our separate ways. I didn't talk to her at all for about 3 weeks after the funeral. While I was at work one day, I get a text from Margaret asking, "Can we meet for dinner?" Her treat. I said, "Margaret, I have some work to do later. I don't think it's a good idea." She begs and pleads. I said, "Okay, I will text you later." At this point, I am perplexed as to why she wants to meet so badly. I think she is going to try and get back with me. Later that night, when we meet at a restaurant for dinner, Margaret starts crying over her food. Then, out of nowhere, she blurts out, "I love you. And I miss you." She goes on saying how sorry she was for what she did and how she hurt me. I told her, "Why are you asking me? I can't. I am still furious at what you did." I also told her, I can't trust her. It will never be like it was. She then asked, what could she do to regain my trust? I simply told her nothing, because I am over you. She then put her head down and started crying a little. Again, I simply told her that you broke my trust and the timing, Margaret, the timing. I had no idea she was going to take it this hard. I then asked her, what would she do if she were in my shoes? I would forgive you. She said, Without hesitation, I said, Margaret is not that easy for me. As the night goes on, she is still trying to convince me to give her another chance, despite me telling her no. Margaret then tells me she would do anything to regain my trust and that she is sorry for what happened. I am not sure how to feel about all of this. What is her motivation to try and get back with me? This has been a lot to process, and it's hard because part of me still cares for her. But at the same time, if I give her another chance, there is a strong chance that she will cheat again. I am not sure how to feel. I don't know if I should just let her go or give her the opportunity of proving herself. We wrap up our dinner date. I thanked her for dinner. She comes over to me and gives me a hug and walks away with tears. After the dinner date, a lot is going through my mind. The next day I call my dad and ask him, can we meet for lunch? He was surprised at first, but he said, sure, let's have lunch. So, as lunchtime comes around, I meet my dad at a restaurant nearby. He asked me, is everything okay? I said yes. I then tell him that Margaret and I met for dinner last night. He said, why does she want to meet you for dinner? I said, I don't know, but she wants me to give her another chance. I asked my dad, what would he do? He said, do you still love her? I told him that no matter what we have been through in the past and how much she hurt me, there was a part of me that loved her. He asked, do you want to give her another chance to prove herself or just let her go? He also added, you don't want to spend your life wondering about what if. My dad was right. I don't want to spend the rest of my life thinking, what if? I thank my dad for having lunch with me. Then I went back to work. As I finished up my workday, I drive home, and when I pull up, Margaret is at my door. I am thinking to myself, what is she doing here? I asked Margaret, why are you here? She says, I can't give up. Please give me another chance. I said, Margaret, I can't. It would not be in my best interest to give you another chance. She says, why? I say to her, you know why? We just went over this last night at dinner. As I am talking to her, I unlocked the door to my house and walk in. Margaret is right behind me, still pleading. We get into the living room and then she tells me she still loves me and just can't give up so easily. She again asked me, what can she do to regain my trust? I finally yelled at her and tell her, you can't. You will never be able to regain my trust. At that point, she went silent, dropped her head and started crying. She walks out and leaves. After that, I didn't hear from Margaret for 2 weeks. I figured she got the message when I yelled at her. I was wrong. I get home from work one day. There is a knock at my door. I asked, who is it? The voice on the other side of the door, it's Margaret. Please, can we talk? She says. I open the door. Margaret is on her knees with their hands interlaced, like she is praying. I said, what are you doing? Get up. Why are you here? She says to me, please consider giving me another chance. I said, Margaret, why do you keep asking? She says, you know, I love you and don't want to miss the opportunity to have a great future together. I know what I did was wrong, but please give me the opportunity to prove to you that you can trust me. I looked at her like she was crazy. I said, Margaret, you killed that chance by cheating. Let me say this again. I am not getting back together with you. 1, you need to stop coming to my home. 2, I have made my mind up. There is nothing you can say or do to make me change my mind. She then bows her head, then looks up again and said, that's it? I said, yes, that's it. She then turns and walks away, totally dejected. After that, I never saw Margaret again. The last I heard, she was still living at her parents' and even dating some guy that a couple of people said he is a bum. One day I am at work. I get a text from Margaret saying she misses me and still loves me, even though I don't want to be with her. I simply read it and deleted it. A couple more days go by and a friend of mine is having a party and invites me. I go with my friends and I see Margaret there. She comes up to me and says she wants to talk, but I ignore her completely. Later that night on the way home from the party, a few of us were driving back when we saw Margaret's car parked at an empty mall parking lot. I said, hey, that's Margaret's car, so we drive up. And as we get closer, we all witnessed her having sex with some guy. We surprised them and Margaret spots me looking at her. I just shook my head and realized at that moment, I made the right decision by not letting her back into my life. I looked at her and smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Needless to say, after seeing Margaret with that guy was definitely closure for me. I had already made my mind up that I was not getting back together with her. But after that, my decision was solidified. Word had got out from some of my friends on what we saw, but that was the extent of it. Weeks go by, and some of our mutual friends tell me they haven't seen or heard from Margaret since then. One day, I get a call from Margaret's mom saying that Margaret is moving out of state with her new boyfriend. I was surprised at the call, but her mom wanted to see how I was since all of the cheating came out. She told me she thought what her daughter did was horrible and she wished me the best. We talked for a few more minutes and then hang up. My workday continues. Then suddenly, Margaret walks into my office. I said, "What are you doing here?" She says she wanted to drop by and see me one last time. And she was in the area. She said, "I wanted to drop by and give you this letter." She puts the letter on my desk and walks out. After she leaves, I am sitting there surprised. She is still going through all of this trouble. And she has a new boyfriend. I pick up the letter and just stare at it. I am debating whether I should open it or not. What will it accomplish by me reading it? Probably nothing. So, I reached over my desk and put the letter in the shredder. I figured there's nothing for me to read or to consider. Margaret is past tense as far as I am concerned. I have the closure I need to move forward and not look back. I am proud of myself for sticking to my decision. As you can see, I am in a much better place now. It is so nice to be able to wake up, not wondering if she would cheat on me again or what new lies she has come up with this time. I don't have to worry about what if. I am free. I can move on with my life without any guilt that I made the right decision, especially thanks to my dad for giving me sound advice. This concludes this Reddit